I'm so excited about this conversation. For one reason is just to get to chat with Cody is always awesome. Cody and I know each other from I was coaching, and then I stopped coaching in college, and you joined the team that I was coaching. Yep. Was it like the year that I stopped coaching?
It was within like 2 years, I think. Because how long was Martine there? Because Martine is the one that recruited me, and then he left shortly after.
Okay. Yeah. So I think he was there. I must have been, what was it, 2012? Did you come?
Yeah, 2013, I think I started.
2013. Okay, so it's 2 years later.
Yeah.
But so we met like on the track with Cody, doing some workouts and just hanging out. But
that's a cool place to meet, on the track.
Yeah. Yep, on the track.
Where was that? What school was that?
Shorter. It's now Shorter University, but Shorter College. Then
that's Georgia, right?
Yep. In Georgia. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
So that was super cool. So Chris, how did you find out about Run Free? I'm just curious. I know I've probably asked you that before, but yeah, I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, because I emailed you, I think, like 2 years ago, like just fishing for some information.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I found the podcast first. Because I was definitely somebody who was like trying to get as much info as I could about these types of topics, and the topics you guys had, I was like, okay, this is what I'm wanting to hear about, like mantras and all that stuff. So that's how I got plugged in. And then you guys talked about the Run Free training, but honestly, I was like, oh, it's probably not for me though, because I'm like just some dad over here dabbling in running. And then I was wrong, but I think I procrastinated for that reason. I was like, I don't know if I'm like the right candidate for this, but yeah, I would say, how long have you guys been doing the podcast? Like 3 or 4 years?
Since we started, like maybe 2020.
Okay.
So, yeah. 4 years. Yeah.
That would have been, yeah. So I got really focused on like, I want to start running a lot more in 2020. So that tracks.
So I'm curious to know, like, what part of, like, how did you self-disqualify yourself? Like, what was it that you were like, no, it's not for me? What was scary?
Probably picking up running late, like after like around 25 years old or so. And like, I was a golfer growing up. And so running was like punishment. And I didn't run probably more than 4 miles until I was 25 or so. So I think, but that was probably some of it. Maybe just like a slight imposter syndrome of like, you don't need to do that. Like that's for other people. That was probably why, I think, if that makes sense. Just like not a ton, but just enough to like deter me from like from pulling the trigger.
So I think it's fascinating. Cody, I'd love to hear your response to this too. I think it's fascinating as an adult to have a coach. I think it's like one of the most interesting experiences of my life ever. Now, I've had a coach for 30 years. Like I never have not had a coach, basically with running. And a lot of people will ask me, how are you still doing it? Because I think a lot of what happens is the people that start really early, Chris, like you started late. Cody and I started ultra early. Cody, I think you started when you were like 5, right?
No, I didn't pick up running until like middle school, but I've been in some kind of organized sport, since I was a wee lad.
But I think it's funny because a lot of people that start early, they quit. And I think the theme that I see, at least for myself, the thing that's kept me in it is a coach, another adult that is saying, Jay, good job. Way to go, buddy. It's just so simple, but it's so encouraging. So I'd love to hear like what you guys think about that, like the longevity connected with the relationship of a coach.
Yeah, I think, Chris, I want to hear you kind of say it again, but Chris and I were talking yesterday, just kind of debriefing his marathon the other week, and something he had said is something to the effect of like, I think, there's a lot of ways you can get kind of the nuts and bolts of training, whether it's like from a blog or reading books or like, having ChatGPT write you a training program or something. There's a lot of ways you can kind of get the nuts and bolts, but one thing that he said he probably wouldn't have gotten out of it was like just having somebody to like give some confidence and some feedback to say like, hey, no, like I know you haven't done, exactly what you might need to do to think you have to run a certain time, but like I've seen XYZ thing in training. I think you're ready for it. I don't know. Am I doing a fair job kind of describing what you said yesterday, Chris?
Yeah. Because to your point, and then Jay, because for me, I was like, I make fun of the Garmin predicted race finish all the time. Because I think the night before I looked at it and it said I'm going to run a 2:58. So that was kind of fun. But I was just making that point to Cody. I was like, if I didn't have you putting together a race plan for me, I would have, because we can talk about it, but I was able to get some performance tests done during the training block. So like VO2 max, lactate threshold, and even looking at all that data, I would have never picked the pacing strategy we picked. And as somebody who's bonked 3 times in all my other marathons, there's no way, like no way I would have done that. So that was invaluable to have a coach say, no, based on what I've seen you do throughout the training, this is the plan. So that was really cool. But to your point of like an adult saying good job, that's huge. And I think maybe it was for me, like not ever having a coach for running. I'm like, I shouldn't have a coach for running. Like I'm not a runner, you know what I mean? But I do think like even like Cody, when I would see the little bubble in Training Peaks of like where you would comment on something, I was just like, we
Yes.
go. Um, Even that like easy run, like the last week of the taper, you said like done and dusted. And I wasn't even feeling that great about that run, but then I was like, yeah, it was dusted. Cody said so.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree.
Well, and it's like as runners, I think we always think, and just in people in general, we always think that the elite athlete, like the person that's at the top, you always think they never have any doubts. Like they don't really struggle like I do, right? Like it's that imposter syndrome of like they don't have the same issues as I do, but really they do.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are these top level athletes, like pro athletes that we've hung out with in Flagstaff and talked to and gotten to be friends with that are like showing up to a workout in the middle of their block and they're like, man, I barely got out of bed today. And so I think that to me is part of that coach athlete reminder of, hey, we're all in this grind together. This sport is extremely hard. And it's totally fine if you need a little pick me up.
Yeah.
I think it's just such a confidence boost too. Like Chris, what you were saying is like, even when you don't feel that good about it, when you get just a little bit of feedback from somebody that is invested and cares, it gives you a little bit more confidence. It gives you a little bit more, like it kind of helps pull you, I think, out of that inside view, right? And gives you somebody that is kind of on the outside looking in that still has like an intimate knowledge of what's going on, but they can look at it from the outside and be maybe a little bit more objective and say, hey, look, like, yeah, yesterday didn't go as great or didn't feel amazing, but like we've done all this work, or like look at how yesterday, fits into the context of the greater plan. And that to me has always been really confidence boosting personally, when it's like, oh, somebody just kind of pulls you out of it, gets you to zoom out a little bit, and you're like, okay, right, everything's cool, everything's good, you're right. I was just freaking out about this little thing, or maybe not taking away the things that I needed to take away from that workout.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely feel like that analogy of like forest for the trees. Like you're definitely in the forest doing another 10 miles easy, a track workout. So like you being able to give like the drone footage of what's going on helps a lot. Yeah.
I think it's extremely easy to get lost in how difficult the things that we're accomplishing as runners are on a daily basis. So I've used this example before. So if we went back to when you were like 9 years old, 10 years old, and we said, hey, one day you're going to run a marathon, Chris, in 2:44:34, you would be like, impossible, right? It's impossible.
Yeah.
And so I think about this from the standpoint of the only reason that was possible is you did the training and you normalized a lot of these hard things. You normalize them as everyday things. And then because it happens gradually, you do sometimes get lost in the fact that you're still improving, because you didn't improve from 3 days ago to today, but you did improve from 6 weeks ago to today. But it's so gradual that having someone remind you of that is just huge.
Yeah, agreed. We talked about that a little bit, Cody and I, the other day, of the 2 half marathons we did building up to the marathon. In both of those, we treated them as workouts, and the final 5K in both of those went really, really hard for me. So like, like 5:45s or 5:40s. And in the second half marathon, I think I closed the last 5K in 17:24, and my 5K PR is a 17:04. And so after the race, I was like, no way, I just did that. And so, but those 2 workouts, like literally the night before, I was like, this is just like the half marathons. Like I'll be tired, but I know I'll have stuff because I've done it. To your point, that yeah, if you just woke up and somebody put you there and said, go do it, you'd be like, it's impossible. But I definitely had to be in those situations, which was super helpful.
So I'm really curious about your previous best was 2:55, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then how long from 2:55 to 2:44:34? How long ago did you run 2:55?
October 2022 was the 2:55. And then I did Boston in 2024, injured, getting through that in 3:01. And so then this past Saturday, 2:44.
I mean, there's no way you run 2:44 and don't have some athletic background. Like what? Like how? Like tell me about that. Like you obviously have stayed in really good shape, and like even though you picked up running a little bit
Picked
later.
up running, yeah, mid-20s, picked up running. I'll turn 40 in April.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, the typical sports through like youth sports, baseball, basketball primarily, but then picked golf was like my main deal in 9th grade. So just not a ton of running going on between 9th grade and 25. But I did marry into some athletic people. Brother-in-law ran at Ole Miss, father-in-law's done Ironmans, and that really was like, I was like, God, I don't do anything. I just golf like sometimes. And then I just started picking it up, and I was like, oh, this whole like going further than I've ever gone before is like addicting. So I got hooked in it pretty hard. But I didn't start doing it, I think, correct until probably like 2019. That's when I got serious. I went from like a 130 half in 2012 to a 121 in 2019. And so I was seeing that jump. I was like, oh, if I do things correctly, which I was not, like no fuel in my first marathon, didn't need it, didn't think I needed it. So yeah, I just started reading and consuming. That's why I found the podcast. I just got really hungry for like, oh, there's a correct way to do these things. And I have not been doing it.
What advice would you give somebody in your similar scenario that's picking it up late? And like what were some of the things that surprised you that you learned that you were like, oh, that was a light bulb moment?
I think one of them was like not having to stay injury prone. I definitely would have identified as like, oh, I'm an injury prone runner. Because I missed 2 years of running from 2013 to 2015 after my marathon, my first one, from IT band syndrome. And so I just, from that moment on, I was like, something else will happen. It'll be like my big toe, my great toe, or Achilles or whatever. And so now like, that was thrilling to get to the race, Cody, without having any sort of worry. Like I was like, I almost don't care what my time is. I'm not hurt. That was like a rush. Because even Boston with like the groin injury, like I did that doing a track workout, just like overextended or something. So I think that's a cool thing. So because I would say like the whole like the holistic training plan of like mobility, like the core, the strength, dynamic warm-ups. Like I think all of that was something I have not done before prior, and I didn't get hurt. So
Yeah.
that was cool. And that's another thing of like I'll see it or I'll believe it when I see it. And it worked. So like that's a big one. Just changing that. Um, but also too is just like the benefit of having somebody sort of change up the pacing because I think I've kind of done the same things. Like, when I go do like a tempo run, it would always be 6:30 because that's where I do my tempo runs. But like our training progressed over time, and you were saying, Cody, you like saw the paces dropping, so you kept adjusting those. Like, didn't know you could adjust those paces. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I was like, I didn't know that was a thing. So it's, and I'm somebody who like I know the 80/20 rule. Like I've read books and stuff, but I've still never put it all together. And so, yeah, so that helped too. And I actually was talking to a friend of mine, Ryan, who I think just signed up. So
Yep.
we had a call today and we were talking about it. And I was like kind of sharing the same stuff with him of just like it's like, yeah, dude, like you've got so much room for like it's gonna be awesome. You're gonna do it. And he's kind of doing the same thing of like, I don't know, like I've had injuries and consistency, and I was like, you'll see. So
That's
those
cool.
those are the things that stick out to me. Um,
And yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but did you miss a single run or workout for injury, like this whole build?
Oh, well, we
Like,
got, say we,
yeah,
sorry, it's a team.
yeah, yeah,
I got sick that one
yeah,
time, and so I think we might have taken that day off, or it was like a 4 mile run.
right.
But yeah, that might have been what we did. And then I know that one time I texted you, which again, having a coach is great because I texted you saying it was after the Chickamauga half in November.
Uh-huh.
I had just done the half, and then I did that 11-mile track workout. And I think my body was like, what are you
Yeah,
doing? Like, what are you doing to us? And I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to disappoint you and like
right.
miss a workout.
Yeah,
But you
because
were
this
just
was like
like, you got,
pretty early on when we started working together, like within
yeah.
the
And you were like, you got to tell me before the workout.
yeah.
And I was like, you got it. And so that was great though, to change it on the fly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, super cool. Just to see like that consistency piece, and something we
Hmm.
talked about too. Like, if I think about kind of keys to what made you so successful this build up is like the consistency was huge, right? We didn't get, I don't feel like ever got too greedy. You were taking a day off every week and like resting and doing a good job of that. And like I said, like nothing really seemed forced, right? You'd be able to do the workouts at the assigned paces or effort levels or whatever, and after a while, like that pace and that effort just kind of naturally got a little faster, and so we'd adjust, and then naturally get a little faster, and so we'd adjust. But nothing ever felt like you were out there like trying to just smash every single workout. Like it was a lot of like, that was a really good one, but it wasn't like super sexy. It was just like you
Yeah.
did it, you
Yeah.
checked the box, got it done, and kind of moved on to the next one. And I think those pieces, like the consistency and just like building gradually and slowly and kind of in a smart way, was yeah, it was pretty key.
Yeah. And I meant to tell you too, like I was like, the days leading up to the marathon, you were kind of, I had my A through F goals of just
Uh-huh.
like, because I wanted a wide net just for post race purposes. But I was already so proud of the workouts. Like I was like, I've already seen myself do things I've never done before. The marathon obviously was the goal, but I was not going to be disappointed if that day had not gone. I mean, I would have been disappointed, but I just had already seen myself do things I would have never thought I would do in the training. And so that was already like a big win. Like I feel like I'd had several key moments already as a runner. So
Yeah,
that was
and that's
cool.
huge. I think that's really cool. I think in terms of like the mentality of that, like the thing that you just said of like kind of celebrating that progress in training, and maybe for lack of a better phrase, but like letting the journey be the focus and not the destination. I think it allows you to go run really well on race day, and if there's not a whole lot of pressure you're putting on yourself, or not like a weight of expectation. It's just like I know I've done great work. I've really enjoyed this process. I've seen growth there, and we're just gonna do our best on race day and let it be what it's gonna be. I think that can be really freeing and really, yeah, just a great like frame of reference to take into a race.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the things I love doing is thinking about how other sports do things and then looking at how runners in the sport of running does things. Because I think that like if you're a basketball player and you're in the NBA and you've got 80 something games to play, there's just no way you're going to go truly all out every game. Like, you just can't. Like, you're not going to make it the entire season. Now, you can't do that every play. You can be strategic, you can be surgical, and you can have times that you go harder and times you don't. I think in running, sometimes we think that there's like if I give maximum effort, then I'm going to get maximum result. But it's just not the case. You still have to plan and have strategy and be surgical about your pacing and not give everything you have every day. And I think that's refreshing to hear as an athlete from your coach. That's good coaching, because that frees you up to not get too far ahead of yourself. And Chris, I would say that's probably why you didn't get hurt primarily, is you are doing things that were within your scope and within your capability at that moment, and you're letting it kind of build on itself.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So I want to read what you wrote in your email about the end of your race, and I want to hear more about it. But so you ran the Wilmington Marathon, and your goal was, what was your best goal? What did you think you could do?
2:45. I was like, I will be beside myself.
All right, and you ran 2:44:34, which is you're beside yourself.
I'm beside. Yep.
So I'm going to read a little bit. You said, I was literally able to race all 26.2. We had a great plan of 3 miles warming up around 6:25 and then stick between 6:13 and 6:20 until mile 20. The first half felt good, and I was conserving energy a bit. Miles 13 to 20 felt way better than I was expecting, and averaged closer to 6:15. The final 10K, I was starting to get really pumped, but still respecting the fact that this is where I typically fall off. That's huge. I ended up closing with 6:14, 6:11, 6:12, 6:05, 6:08, and 5:45. I think I was the most excited about was feeling good the whole race and knowing there was definitely more I could take off. A 2:39 feels in reach, and I would have never said that before this experience. And then you gave Cody some props as well, which, golly, when I read that, I was like, this is one of those mountaintop pinnacle race experiences where everything came together, the pacing, the training, the mentality. Man, good job. That's amazing.
Thank you.
I just want to hear anything else about the race that was just amazing. And I also want to hear how you celebrated. You had to have done something pretty epic.
You'll probably be disappointed in my celebration. But no, yeah, it was even like hearing the paces read out loud. I'm still just like, I'm still processing it, like honestly. Because even that, I remember hearing about other runners like locally. Chattanooga is like a pretty good like running town. There's some fast people here. Um, and I would hear about their times in the 2:40s, and I was just like, they're on another planet. You know what I mean? Like not even like a, oh, I wish I could be there. Like that's not me. So that's been something that's like sounds really weird to say, but I'm still processing that like I'm on the side of running at that speed, which is crazy. But yeah, that's sort of holding the thing of like Cody knows I'm ready with the reality of like I know how I've run races in the past at this distance. So trying to like push those negative thoughts down and just show up and do the plan. And I think I told, maybe I mentioned this to you, Cody, that I kind of ran it like a workout where I had, our plan was so like clear and I'd like thought through it that I was like, I haven't had any issues either doing or beating the workouts. So I'm going to treat the marathon no different. Like we're going to stick to that like opening 3 miles. We're going to stay in those ranges. And then I remember my favorite thing you told me was I think this is how you said it. Mile 13 through 20. I think you said whether you're feeling bad or good, it'll pass. And so I kind of had that sort of personality wise, I'm kind of like even, and
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I like that of like not gonna get too pumped, not too, because you know you have the sort of that inclination to like, oh, let's turn it on now. Feel
Yeah.
good at 15, and then here we go again. So yeah, so that was kind of tricky, and it was one of those things where it was like business time as we were running, but then as soon as I got done, I was just so thrilled. I was like, I had to stay in that place of respect, like where you're at in the race, but squeeze it down just a little bit, because when I like you run around the lake in Wilmington from mile like 18 through 23. And after I'd kind of got to the turnaround around mile 21, I was like, ooh, I want to go so fast now. Um, but I still sort of was like in my head, I was like, all right, there's that like 6:13, 6:20 thing. And then sort of once I could feel I was in the clear, um, it was just the best feeling ever. But yeah, that thing you said that I'd written to you, racing all 26 miles was like, I was like, oh, that's why people want to do other ones.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
because I've done other ones, but it's been one of that thing where like if somebody asked me, I'd be like, we'll see.
Yeah.
I need time to process that mile 18 situation I just went through. But yeah, this one I was like, God, is there a marathon next month? I know that's like not what you would coach me to do,
Yeah.
but it was so fun. Like it was amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
No, and
the,
props to you too for executing that plan, because that, it's one thing to like write it down on paper and read it, but like in the moment when you have the nerves and the adrenaline and the excitement of race day, and there's other people going out fast, and like you said, there's a half marathon that kind of started with the marathoners too, so there's all
Yeah.
those extra folks. Like to be able to hold back and be strategic about it early on, and then like you said, like in those the later stages where like you're kind of going through a little bit of ups and downs in terms of like feeling really good but not really being sure if this is the time to push, just being like mentally disciplined. Like you got to give yourself some credit for that, because that's hard to do. Like I think anybody who's ever run a marathon has been there in some form or fashion, and it's really hard to execute that well on race day. Like that's a skill.
Yeah, I definitely would slip into that on training runs sometimes where I would just have to say like easy, easy. Like on some of those, like I think the 10-mile marathon pace thing, it was really easy to get going downhill and just want to, for 10 miles, it's like, oh, I can go faster for 10. I should just
Yeah.
do it. But yeah, and having that guy, I found a guy at mile 3. We ran from mile 3 to 13. That was huge. Just to like, we like bump knuckles and stayed together until he turned to finish the half. And so that was great to just have a buddy to run beside. So that helped a little bit.
I think that's truly the epitome of a good internal game, a good mind game. What you described, what you were doing from really 13 to probably closer to 22, it looks like in the pacing. And I had this really interesting experience in the airport a few months ago. I saw this guy in the airport with a cauliflower ear, like both of them, like just totally beat up. And I was like, I'm going to go talk to this guy. And he had a bunch of tats. And I was like, hey, what do you do? And he was like, I fight MMA. And so I sat there, I had a layover. I just sat there and talked to him for like 45 minutes. And I was asking him mindset questions like, how do you get ready for a fight? Like, what is it? Like, what do you do? How do you prep? And I was just grilling him. And the one thing he said that I was like, that applies to running so much is he said, when there's a young fighter and they're too high on themselves, like they're too amped and you can see it, you can see their adrenaline pumping early. He's like, oh, I'm getting them in the second or third round. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating, because I've made that mistake in longer racing before, where I didn't do what you did, Chris, which was calm yourself down, not allow your emotions to go way up when they don't need to, right? You've got to settle them, and you've just got to get through. You've got to let that 13 to 20 pass, and then you kind of let it come to you later. So the picture that he gave me is like when you see the walkout, like he was like, I'll watch the walkout. And if they're too bouncy and jumping around, he's like, I know. I know I got him. And he was like, what happens physiologically is you use all your adrenaline and your energy. And then you have like the definition of a peak of your adrenaline energy. If you're at the peak, it has to come down. So you definitely don't want to peak that mental focus and energy too early in a marathon.
Yeah.
Because then you're going to feel that lull and that heaviness. So I think that's just incredible that you were able to like settle that and run well all the way to the finish.
Yeah, something I wrote in the race plan that applies directly to what you just said, Jay, was the first thing, like the first 3 miles, I said start half asleep. And that's something I stole from a friend of mine who I think got it from his coach, but this idea of like don't get too amped too early. It's a long race. Like you've got to measure that excitement. You got to measure that the focus and like the kind of the ability to get dialed in out over the course of that long race. And so like that's just one thing I picked up. Like I said, I think from a friend. He said, you got to start the marathon half asleep. Like just turn off the brain. Don't get too excited. Like just kind of keep things mellow. And then as the race goes on, you can kind of wake up and put a little bit more thought and a little bit more mental energy and focus into it. But yeah, I like that analogy there from MMA.
Yeah, I love the half
So
asleep. That helped me a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's a great way to describe it and to put it into your mind, because you can kind of live that out early. Cody, so I wanted to ask you, coaching Chris, like what were some of the things that you felt like he responded well to, and like you were like, hey, I learned something about him in this build up that maybe the next build is going to be different or better, or something that you're like, oh, I'm starting. Because I think coaching, when you coach somebody for a long time, that's when you really get to learn them, and you can see these little trends and you can see what they respond well to. So like, what did you learn about Chris that's like that you're pumped about for next time?
Oh man, I think the one thing that comes to mind is like he's a closer. If you look at like you mentioned the 2 half marathons we did in the build up, and even like finishing a marathon at 5:45 pace, like no matter who you are, even if you're a pro, like that's still pretty darn fast. And to have your fastest mile of a race be the last one is really cool. But then not just that, but like you're able to kind of squeeze paces down. And I see it in workouts too, where like you just, you're really good at kind of dialing things in and getting a little bit faster and a little bit faster and a little bit faster as the workout goes on. And it's something like I think we practice too. But like that's a skill, that's a talent, and that's something I think is going to be really fun to play with when we ever, kind of the next phase we talked about working on some shorter distances, some 5K work. And it's kind of even more acute of a skill when you're at those faster paces and kind of riding that line a lot tighter. So I think it's going to be something fun to play with in the future.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you said that, Cody, about even if you're a pro marathoner, finishing in 5:45 is fast, like there's a lot of truth to that. Because like if in April at Boston, guarantee you can go to that last mile and you can time some people's last miles. There will be some 2:25 guys that run 6-minute pace the last mile. Like that will happen. There'll be a bunch of elite athletes that run 5:30 and 5:20 their last mile, just because of the way the marathon is. And there's like this there's an exponential decrease in the margin the faster you get. Like it gets harder and harder to get those final seconds. And so the closer you get to 5 something, you really are in the neighborhood of a lot more people. And I think I saw that when I was in Kenya a few years ago. I got to go and visit with some friends, David Cherame. They run an orphanage right next to Kipchoge's camp. So I got to go train with those guys for a month. And it was fascinating because the best athletes in the world can do their easy runs with the best ladies in the world. And then I can come in and be running with those guys on the easy runs, and I'm nowhere near either of them. So like the margin gets slimmer and slimmer as you get closer and closer. So that's pretty cool. I don't know there's many people that can say they ran their last mile of a marathon in 5:45. That alone, if there was no other accomplishment, is huge.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing too, I would say, like, learning about Chris is something he kind of touched on earlier too, is like he's super consistent, and I think that's like a personality trait, or like you said, you kind of never get too high, you don't get too low, and you see that like in your training, like you're really consistent with it. Like we talked about, like you're not out there trying to prove yourself in workouts and just smash them out of the park. But you don't really have a whole lot of bad workouts either, right? Like everything is like pretty good. It's just kind of in this nice little zone where there's a lot of consistency, and that's, I think, a big, like I said earlier, like something that has led to progress for you is like not getting too high, not getting too low, and in both kind of the emotional side of things and in like the physical training of like, doing what you need to do and just kind of checking the boxes and getting a little bit better most days.
Yeah, I did appreciate you answering. I feel like it was halfway through our training. I asked if it was okay if I beat the workouts.
Yeah.
Because just like mentality was like, I got to be under, like I can't be on it because then I might be above it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can't risk that. And you had told me like as long as you're willing to do it the other side of that and slow up when your body needs to. And I was like, great answer. It's a good point. Because it made me think about it. I was like, ooh, I don't know if I would. So
that's something I learned from I think from Ryan pretty directly, and running with him like while he's on the bike on a few workouts up in Flag and stuff, where he's just like, yeah, like the days when you're feeling good, like let it rip a little bit, and the days when you're not, you got to be okay kind of dialing it back, or even bagging a workout if things just aren't quite clicking. But that takes some confidence to do. Like that's not easy, especially for like a lot of the type A type runners that we are, where we want to push all the time, and like you said, we want to be under the given paces, and we want to make sure we're nailing everything. Like sometimes it's going to work out, and sometimes that's just not what your body's got in store for the day. And so, like I said, it takes some confidence to be able to both push when you're feeling good, but also be able to really dial things back when you're not and things aren't clicking.
Yeah, variability in pacing, even from workouts to easy runs to tempo runs to VO2 max work to mile pace stuff, like that's a skill that a lot of new and young athletes don't develop. Like they run a lot of their paces are exactly the same. Like the tempo run is only 10 seconds faster than the easy run. And so having that variability, it does go both ways, because some days when you hammer it, the next day, like I'll still run, out of 10 runs a week, I'll still run one or two with my wife, and we'll run 8:30 or 9-minute pace, which is just, I mean, my heart rate will be like 115 or something like that. But you need that some days, especially if you just, dug deep the day before. So yeah, being willing to do that is huge. So I have one more topic that I want to make sure that we hit. It's one, Cody, that I've learned a lot from you and Joe, and honestly, I'm the most excited about at the moment personally. Is talk to me about the fueling strategy and how that went in the marathon, and also in training.
Yeah, Chris, take it away. I think you did a great job on this side.
Yeah, I think I had like the biggest question mark with like during the race. I did appreciate like Joe gave me the sort of the PDF of sort of general, and I did use that to do like our grocery ordering, and so that helped. Just and for me, it was kind of like making sure it was eat more of these category for like carbs and stuff. Um, but yeah, so I think the things I did outside of the race was ensuring like in that window after a long run or a hard workout, I was giving myself 30 minutes to get something in. I did not do that in the past. I was like, I don't feel like eating right now. Like I'm gonna wait till I get like really hungry. And so I think kind of just trying to really take that seriously of like, I think to get the max benefit out of what I just did, I've got to eat right now. And so that was something I kind of changed and did during this training plan. And then during that first long run where you said, let's test out our nutrition, it was 50 to 60 grams of carbs per hour. And I can't remember 500 to 800 milliliters of fluids. Is that right? Something like that. So for me, I was using SIS. That's the ones I ended up enjoying. I've used a bunch of stuff, but their electrolyte that had sodium, I could take those without feeling like I had to have liquid to get them down. And those were 21 carbs. So I could do 3 of those per hour. And I want to say by our second long run workout, I was pretty dialed in on that feels good. And I did tell you probably 3/4 of the way through that I noticed if I take like scratch or something, more calories in my fluids, that I'll start to like cramp up in my stomach and feel uncomfortable. And so you made the recommendation just to go with water. And so that's what I did during the marathon. Had my gels. I didn't take the last one because I was on a high that was riding too high for gels. And so I just skipped the last one to run really fast. But I only took water in on the course. And what was really nice is I wasn't guessing like, is this going to be the right thing? It was just every 20 minutes I would take an SIS. And so that was really nice to get it dialed in early enough that I could practice it. And then the other thing that Cody had me do was track workouts. Sometimes I would just get like drink mix, and then like during a cool down in between sets, I would drink it. But he recommended gels, like maybe gels and liquid during those. So I started doing that as well. But yeah, all that couldn't have gone better, I think, as far as like during the run.
So tell me again, during the marathon, you just took an SIS every 20 minutes.
Every 20 minutes,
Okay.
21.
And then what was that formula? That was electrolytes with 20 grams of carbs?
Yeah, 21 grams of carbs. The sodium, there's not a ton in there, but I want to say like around 200 milligrams,
Yeah.
maybe. That
Yeah,
sound
that's great.
appropriate. Yeah, I think they're
Brilliant.
90 calories, those gels.
Yeah.
And
So
the main reason was you could almost drink them. That's why I like
Yeah.
Liquid.
Yeah, that's great. Man, I think it's all about finding that rhythm that agrees with your stomach and that's regular and that has the 3 components. You got to have carbs, you got to have electrolytes, and you got to have water.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a big key to success there was what you talked about, practicing, kind of figuring it out early and experimenting a little bit early on in the training block. And then you practice like every long run. And then we were using some of these opportunities where like you don't need a gel maybe to get through like an hour 15-minute workout on the track or like a harder tempo run or something. Like, most of us can get through that just fine without a gel. But like using that opportunity to train your GI system, to have a gel on board when you're breathing hard, when your heart rate's up, when you're shaking up your stomach because you're out there running 5:30 pace or whatever on the track. Like using those opportunities, not just to train like the metabolic side, but also to train our GI system to get used to what it's going to kind of be facing on race day. Like those things I think were huge, and making sure that everything went smoothly on the race day for you.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, basically, this is like maximalist fueling. Like instead of thinking, what can I get by with? You're flipping the thought process of how much can I get in during my training and how close to homeostasis with my carbs, electrolytes, and fuel and water can I stay? Because we know even 2% water loss has an adverse effect on your performance. So even more so when you lose carbs, and even more so with electrolytes. With this mentality, I'm curious, why, Cody, do you think so many runners refuse to implement so well-tested, backed science fueling strategies, electrolytes, water, carbs? Like what is going on in our sport? Like why don't more people do fueling during their track sessions? Because some of these track sessions take longer than the long runs do. Some of them take, by the time you warm up and cool down, it's not unusual to be out there for 2.5 hours, and even 3 or 3.5 hours for a really long one.
Man, I don't know what kind of monster track sessions you're doing, Jay, but 3 hours is a long time.
Well, I'm just talking about, you get to the track,
right.
you warm up. I mean, easily 50 minutes could pass. I'm not talking about you're running for 3 hours, but from the time you're there to leave, easily
No,
could be 3 hours. Yeah.
yeah, no, I gotcha. You know, it takes
Yeah.
time to do drills and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
No, I think the big like hurdle that I think a lot of athletes run into is taking like the general nutrition recommendations for the general population and trying to apply those for athletes. Because those are kind of two different buckets there, right? So if we think about like general nutrition recommendations, you know, like maybe limit the amount of sugar you're having, right? Maybe like don't eat a ton of calories if you aren't moving a lot, right? But it's kind of the flip side for athletes where like, yeah, we need added sugar when we're out there exercising because it's a quick fuel source that gets into your system fast. It's not going to cause GI distress like other, you know, carb sources might. It's going to help you run faster, right? We have all this data on that. And so kind of flipping the script a little bit, kind of like what you said and saying, instead of thinking like from a scarcity mentality of like, how little can I get away with? Maybe like flip the script and think, okay, like how much can I get away with to fuel my workout better? Like one analogy I love is like, if you're trying to take your car and go on a road trip, you don't put like 2 gallons of gas in it and then expect to make it, you know, 200 miles down the road, right? Like it's the same thing for our body. Like if we want it to go far and to go fast, like we need to make sure we're taking care of it, but we're also like fueled up. And that doesn't mean, you know, just before and after. Those are really important, but also during too. And I think that's one of the things that, you know, maybe this is a little bit of an aside, but whenever like we're seeing all these records fall in the marathon on both the men's and the women's side, in the ultra marathon world where fueling is even more critical because you're not out there for 2 or 3 or 4 hours, you're out there for 4 or 5 or 6 or 24 or 48 hours. Like we're seeing all kinds of records fall, course records, and just the depth of fields, people running super, super fast. And that all comes from like a fueling standpoint, or I think a lot from a fueling standpoint. People are just able to tolerate more. They're practicing more, so they're not having GI issues. And like, man, kind of the more you can eat, you know, to a degree, but the more you can eat while you're out there, the better you're going to feel for longer.
I think part of it is running lends itself to like a minimalist feel. And so I think it's totally true, like using those dietary recommendations for the masses. If that was the case, Chris, you would be avoiding sodium because you would be worried about too much sodium. But dude, we sweat so much. So I bought this little test kit where you can test your pee with your sodium to like test myself. And I had to increase it even more because for whatever reason, I just process a ton of sodium to keep my levels at the necessary amount. But yeah, I think the thing too is the minimalist mentality, because it doesn't take much to run. And I think historically we've come from like, a lot of running comes from like a hippie, like get out in the woods and, you know, be out there and have fun. Whereas the cycling community, the interesting thing is they don't think like we do. They're thinking power output, data. When I take these carbohydrates, sodium, water, my power output is better for 15 more minutes. So I could care less what I eat or drink. I'm going to do whatever creates the most power. I actually think we need to adopt a little bit more of that kind of mentality and just throw a little bit of caution to the wind and be like, hey, whatever I need to eat, drink, and take in, if it aids me, then that is exactly what I need to do.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's a lot of stuff we're learning, especially from the cycling and triathlon world when it comes to sports nutrition. Just in part, I also think because running, like there's that jostling motion of our GI tract. And so like it is like physically more difficult to digest whenever you're shaking your GI system, 180 times a minute, versus when you're on a bike or doing other endurance sports, rowing or something, right, where you're kind of stationary or you don't have that movement up and down. So I think you can in some of those other sports really push the limits, and we're seeing people do that. And I think some of that's starting to trickle down into the running community, which I think is a really good thing. Ultimately, we're learning a lot, and I think still in 5 years, 10 years from now, there's going to be all kinds of stuff that we look back and be like, man, I wish we would have done this 5 years ago. I wish we would have known about this.
Yeah, I think the recovery issue of fueling during is the other part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just start your recovery process before you're even done.
Yeah.
And then, Chris, did you notice that when you got your fueling right, that all of a sudden the next day on your easy jog, you're like, holy cow, if I had to, I could do something today. I know I shouldn't, but if I had to, I could.
Yeah, I mean, I think I made a few comments to Cody about just seeing my recovery speed. Like that was one of those things I was not looking for as a marker, just was, under the radar. But I would do like Saturday's run with some work in the middle, and then, that night making a lot of noises, moving around the house, because it's a little sore. And then Sunday I was like, oh, I'm glad it's an off day, but I could do something today. And even the marathon, like I think by Tuesday I was ready to run. And in the past I've been like, I need a walker. Like I can't do this, and like, IT bands, like nothing's sore right now. And that's awesome.
Yeah, it makes it so much more enjoyable. And I think it creates a positive feedback loop where when you do it right, man, that would be my ask to anyone listening that's like, I don't know, man, do it right for a month. Like just commit a month, fuel right, recover right, and it will create that positive feedback loop where you feel so good you want to do it again. You want to do it right again. It's like what you said, Chris, after you finish, you're like, man, I want to do another one of these.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, sweet. That's all I had. Anything you guys wanna add or anything we missed?
I forgot to tell you how I celebrated.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
drove from Chattanooga to Wilmington, which is about 8 hours. So literally I got my little like age group award. I got my little Wilmington mug, and I got in my car and I drove back to Chattanooga right after 8.5 hours. And at 150, and they had Hawaiian rolls and like bananas and stuff. So I crushed that. Hawaiian roll was awesome right after,
Yeah.
because the last thing I wanted was like Gatorade. Um, so I got the Hawaiian roll, got in the car and drove. And then at 150, like in the afternoon, I was like, I'm about to pass out. Like I'm so hungry because I just got on the road and the only thing around was a Pilot gas station. And I just got like a plethora of like, I got Honey Nut Cheerios, I got beef jerky, I got a protein bar. It was just not that, because people were like, what meal did you eat? I was like, not important. Like it
You
was,
don't want to
like I
know.
didn't tell you that, Cody, because I was like, Cody'd be like, what are you doing?
No,
Um,
that's hilarious. I ran an ultra a couple of weeks ago, right before your marathon, and like yeah, that night I had like McDonald's French fries and like chicken, McGriddle or something that was just like super greasy and like not even that good, but it was just like you said, like I was just like all of a sudden like I needed food,
yeah.
like calories and salt, and so like yeah, sometimes that's just like what you got to make do with.
It was great.
So even though the celebration maybe was embarrassing to tell, was it satisfying?
Oh, it was the best. I was just like, and now I'm gonna move on to the second course, which
Yeah.
is, some Honey Nut Cheerios.
That's
It was great.
awesome.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was so good. And honestly, the long ride home gave me time to just think through everything. I was still processing that I did that. It was insane.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. That was super fun. One thing with marathons is to do it justice. Golly, you have to hear the whole story. There's always a good marathon story. So thanks, Chris, for sharing that.
Oh yeah, you got it. Thank you guys. This was fun.
Yeah. And thanks, Cody, man. Great job coaching Chris. Chris, great job following the plan and excited to see what you guys do next. Yeah, I'm so excited to see it. Like, maybe every mile is going to be 5:45 at some point.
I would be shocked, honestly. There's more in the tank.
Yeah.
See what Cody puts in the plan.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right. So everybody go have some dinner, but not from the Pilot gas station.
I won't be going there tonight.
You can do that after any marathon that you run 5:45 or better at the end, but not on a regular Friday.
It was an accident that I ended up in a Pilot. So,
so cool. All right, guys, y'all have a good one.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Chris.
All right, later. Bye.
Bye, guys.